All right, well, welcome. Today, on September 30th, here we are going to review the system refresh solution, as we call it. Where we're going, we don't need manual reconfig, kind of a tagline to have fun here. But IT-Conductor FLUX is the solution that will help you accelerate and automate your system refresh. And we like to take you through that journey and have a little bit of fun at the same time, flashing back to the Future theme. And I will go through some presentation, and then we'll talk about some stories and pain points, why you need to solve this problem, and also how we tackle this automation as a solution that will expedite your reconfig and avoid mistakes that are costly, as well as have a repeatable process that will help you automate your operations. And then we'll do a little live demo. We won't do the full system refresh. Obviously, that takes a little more time, but I'll take you through the solution and show you how easily it can work in terms of providing you the cockpit to orchestrate your system refresh post-copy process. Okay, and then at the end, we'll have some Q&A if needed. So what stories and what challenges are we facing? Everybody who does system refresh as part of the ongoing lifecycle management of SAP knows that it's a high effort. It's a lot of manual process involved when you have everything from copying databases and doing the post copy, the pre. A lot of people tell us that they have to do screenshots and save the config in many different ways. They have to do things in the OS, the database, the application to make sure that after the database copy, the QA environment is put back to some usable state for QA purposes. So this is kind of the challenges we face, and every one of us who's done this knows the laborious process. Sometimes it involves multiple teams. You have OS team, the database team, and the basis has the most number of reconfiguration items to do following a refresh. So again, there's a lot of challenge, and mistakes here can be very costly. You're dealing with real production data that the risk involved in terms of audit and all those can be also very costly for companies who don't do it correctly. You might find problems not immediately, but you might find problems a little bit later, and which makes it worse. And so let's go through some of these. So let me tell you a few stories. I guess my 30 plus years of working with SAP and lots of different customers in all shapes or form. When you're doing a system refresh, definitely time is not on your side. You are rushing against time. And this is why we have the clock tower here. Everything has to happen just right? You have to get everything ahead of time before the database gets copied, your QA environment. You got to get your screenshots. You got to get all your config that you need to put back, somehow store and capture, right? So I've seen people do things like write scripts and, exporting this config, that config. That list gets pretty long. So time is definitely not on your side. Everything needs to line up in the right sequence to get the system looking correctly. If not, then you're risking essentially a post copy of a database system that maybe the application is not so usable, right? So, and everybody's eyes is on you trying to get the system back so that QA team can continue the testing of various different activities. So one of the things we kind of say at the clock tower, right? You've got the lightning strike, and the cable's got to go to the car, and it's got to light it up all the right time. So if you're not there, not prepared for it, a system copy can drag out for days, if not weeks. We've seen customers take at least a week for some of the systems that are complex to do their whole refresh in post-config. So some more stories. Been at customers where things just won't start. After you start the copy, the database comes up, they hand over your system, and then you try to run something. Maybe you're trying to run the logical system conversion, BDLS. You're running something, and maybe you don't have the right number of batch processes. Maybe you don't have the right batch server settings or RFC destination. Things just don't run, and they don't work properly. So this analogy we have in Back to the Future is like, you're going back, and then you're scrambling, you're in a hurry, somebody's chasing you. Systems just won't start because you don't have the right config, and there's just too many things to reconfigure in a small amount of time after refresh. And that's what some of the problems expressed to us is by customers. They have a long run book. Maybe it's 100 steps, 20 of those steps might be system, database, but a lot of that step 80 of it is the reconfig afterwards by the basis team. And there's a lot of things going on there that needs to be taken care of just in the right time, the right sequence, right? Otherwise, nothing starts and you start into panic mode. So some more fun stories here. If you follow the Back to the Future theme, there's the alternate reality, right? You're in some other time. So when things don't look right, you bring up the system. Perhaps you're trying to run a Fiori connection to your system to test. Things just don't look right. Maybe you have an interface connection and RFCs are firing off but returning results from the wrong system. Maybe you have your connections wrong. So anything like this, when you've done all that work, you bring the system, you bring it up, but then you try to run something or somebody's going in and doing something. Maybe you forgot a step and just things just goes downhill from there, snowball. So problems happen and a lot of them can be avoided, and also some of them are critical, right? So I've seen cases where maybe you are doing an RFC connection to a system that you're not supposed to because your credential is still a production credential. So inadvertently, if you do something that you're aware of, that's one thing, but sometimes mistakes are made and then you find out later that something bad went off, like a job submitted against some wrong system. So this kind of you like start thinking I'm in a twilight zone, right? So this alternate reality is what we're trying to avoid as well in the system refresh setting. Let's continue some more stories because I've got lots of stories. This hoverboard chase, if in Back to the Future, everybody's chasing him, right? So think about this. You're the basis guy, the lead for doing this refresh. You've got QA teams, you had change management, maybe a charm. They're waiting for transports to get released to production, but QA system's not up. Maybe you have integration testing. They need to test interfaces, maybe third-party connections. You need to do some end-to-end workflow that's not working until your system's up. So you have a lot of people chasing you. And so you're on kind of a time rush, right? And if you're getting into a scenario where you're panicking, you may miss out some critical steps. We've seen steps where maybe the entire thing is done and then you didn't put the license back and nobody could connect. Users are not connect, or maybe you forgot to put credentials back into the systems. So even system connections, your secure credentials are not working. So everything like that, including even SSL certificates, you're connecting and your connections getting rejected. So everybody wants something. Now you've got all these people waiting for systems to be available. Who do you cater for? This group, that group, your priorities, etc. So we find that this stretches out the time because no longer your QA is just, for one group. There's lots of people waiting for doing things there. So what priority do you put to reconfiguring one thing versus another? If it takes you time to put some config back, that's going to cost time for some other group that's waiting on the system. So in this kind of chase thing, something happens, maybe a script dies and then you're stuck and then everybody else is waiting. So this is a seriously problem as well. We see that. But last but not least, just in the name of fun, if you do your system config and you find out that you glitched and you got a system up, but now it doesn't look quite right, as we said before, sometimes doesn't look quite right. Mistakes do happen. I've seen where system will come up and you know what, even the simple thing like if you're running a DBA schedule in DBA cockpit or DB13 to back up the database or something like that, and you forgot to update that, you know what, it's connecting, but it's backing up the system, calling some other system, doing a remote DBA copy call to do a backup. I've seen this happen. If it's try to call even backed into on another system. So you thought you have a backup, doesn't run or it runs, but you don't actually have a backup until you monitor some time later and you're in some kind of weird time continuum, where you just like, hey, weird, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Something doesn't look right. Now, you wish you went back to put something back in there. So that's always, we're jumping around different times. I'm like, oh, I missed that config. I need to put that one back. But where do I get that from now? Did I capture that screenshot? Oh, man, I forgot to take that screenshot. So literally some people have a run book or Word document and they put tabs in there with all the different things they need to go through and eyeball it, take screenshots and write down what they need to put back in there. That list just keep growing because SAP system doesn't actually ever stay static, right? It's always changing. The time, like for instance, present time keeps moving on. You're in the back trying to save something like, I don't know, maybe you're connecting to Cloud AOM. You have the config to save as well. But if you didn't, you went and you refresh the system, that's gone, right? So you go, oops, I wish I was able to go back in time and get that config to, essentially put the system back to where it needs to be. So these are some of the stories that I thought was, interesting to bring up. So those are all the stories, but what is the need? The need is to avoid these mistakes, to make a parallel, more efficient way to store your config, bring it back, fix all the issues, make it look like a QA system. And then you've got fresh data from the future that you brought in the system. Like QA looks fresh, it's got new data, but it's got the old config. That's really what we want, right? That's the solution we need. And that's really the need that we see in so many places today. Even as shockingly as I've seen it, lots of places today still doing very manual based system refresh. They may do it once a year, once every 6 months, or once a quarter. But it literally takes a team of like 3 to 7 days, sometimes even longer, depending on the size of the database as well, to complete a system copy and a refresh. So this is what we're trying to solve. And here's Flux. And Flux is here to solve the issue. And the name Flux, as you can see why the flux capacitor is important in Back to the Future, right? It's where all the data flows. And you've got in the an analogy is like the energy, the flux of things coming in and out. So Flux is able to export out your config using SAPGUI, save those config, technical config. Could be 100 or 80 different things, in 1,000 places. We save those in logical manner, and then we use the SAP equivalent of R3 trans essentially to make it compatible across platforms. So if you upgrade to different versions, that you on different database, maybe today you're on-prem, you migrate, everything is compatible within the R3 trans framework with your system. And we leverage the built-in SAP background scheduling. So that allows you to essentially do the whole orchestration of the export import process. And that with that, we provide detailed logging to ensure that you have compliance and know exactly what you say, what you bring back, right? Again, you don't want to go back, restore something and go back to the future and like, oops, I forgot to put something back the way it's supposed to be. And now my futures looks different, right? So that's not something you want. You want to be something consistent, exactly what you need. And so let's go through what the architecture looks like. IT-Conductor FLUX is an approved solution on SAP Store. So SAP themselves are reselling solution. Some people might ask, what are competitive products? SAP, you have Llama, they have a PCA, but that actually is quite a complex tool. You have to install the product and you have to configure it. You have these templates and things like that. That's quite complex. And it's also a licensed product. So IT-Conductor works seamlessly built into your environment, and we can go through this in a demo. So I'll just step through with the export jobs. We'll interface with R3 trans. We store your config in the operating system file. So we pick our config, use a SAP trans, and then the data can be as configured wherever you want to store that data, maybe on a network drive, a fast drive. Maybe you can share across different systems. Maybe you're doing a production to QA, but also you want to make a sandbox copy or training system. That can be made available across your network. So that's how IT-Conductor FLUX kind of works at a high level. And what are some of the important considerations? With all tools and solutions, we want to make sure that you follow the best practices. Like any system refresh, when you bring the system up, it looks like production, right? So you got to make sure things like your security and your jobs are suspended. So make sure only people who get in, maybe lock out all users except for basis guy doing the actual post copy, as well as the jobs. You don't want jobs firing off before you are able to refresh the config from the QA so that you don't have inadvertent jobs go off. So those are just easy best practices. We are scoped to do primarily the technical config, although we can support custom packages. Well, maybe you have a Z table that store config for something, and part of your refresh, you want to store that. We can customize those for you. But in essence, we are doing the technical config, like your connectivity, your logon groups, your license, and your inbox settings, etc. Those are technical config, and we can store those. Now, master and transaction data, other people ask, does it do, data masking, or maybe selectively bringing back only certain tables, certain range of data? No, IT-Conductor FLUX primarily take care of the post copy for config only. So when you're looking at master or transactional data, there are solutions out there that do that, right? So what happens also after you get the system into a solid config, now you're ready to convert your logical system. So let's say you copy PRD to QAS, and typical BDLS runs afterwards. You still have to do that, right? And we can help you get there pretty quickly. And depending on what database you have, you might actually have other scripts to do things like create indexes and run BDLS, etc. Again, we have a lot of experience in that area because IT-Conductor actually has multiple solutions around system refresh. The IT-Conductor product itself for Flux does the PCA, but we have an end-to-end solution as well. If you want to orchestrate, for instance, doing client copies or running BDLS, or even running some specific job with variants to mask data, etc., that can be coordinated through IT-Conductor orchestration engine. Okay, we talked about parallel processing. Again, depending on your server size, how many jobs you want to run, export, import, multiple packages, etc. You can also slice and dice how many of these you want to bring back in. Not everybody want to bring everything back into QA. So although when you are exporting, we recommend you can export everything, right? Again, if you need to go back to the path, that's what your saving point is. So you can set the clock, go back, get exactly what you need. And then if you don't have a need, don't bring it back. If you have a need later, bring it back. So all of that is stored safely for you, okay? And so we can handle the parallel processing to make sure it comes back efficiently. Now, because we also run IT-Conductor FLUX jobs to export and import, in our process, we do address the jobs and the variants separately. So they're more of a synchronous. Everything else is asynchronous. We recommend actually saving your variants and batch jobs in a separate config, and that will be alternate, bring back before or after you do the Flux import. We recommend bringing it back first so that all your jobs and variants come back. So then also when you do the Flux import, you can store your job logs as well, part of that for your auditing and purposes. So some key features, again, automation of the technical config is SAPGUI driven. You don't need to have OS access, you have database access. If you're in a RISE environment, that will help greatly because SAP's ECS folks or folks that do the managed service will give you a database copy and then essentially make sure it's up, your stack is up, and they give you your login. You have your login to your production client and you do whatever you need to do to restore it, right? That's their kind of roles and responsibility hand off to you. With R3 integration, you don't need to worry about doing it. That's natively available. And again, your batch job, as long as you have sufficient resources on your server, bring up the system with enough background processing, that should take care of most of the needs to import and export data as needed. So the logging itself is very important. As I say, sometimes when you've done a refresh, maybe a week later, 2 weeks later, and somebody's asked, well, did you bring back this config or that? Well, you have all the logs and you go, hey, that table, config, let me go in and check. Yes, we did export it out of all these clients. We brought it back to all these clients. So you can actually provide that as evidence. And we've seen auditing requirements for that as well. And again, IT-Conductor is a full orchestration, agentless platform, so we can do a lot more above this. So IT-Conductor can connect to your SAP environment. If you have our services for orchestration, we can run way beyond just the post-copy stuff. We can do things before. We can even monitor the resource available and make sure that after you have the system restored and configured, it should be healthy and operating as needed for the end users, right? For everything from job, single sign-on, system performance, availability, all that is available as well. Okay, so at this point, I'll just summarize one for folks that say, hey, this is good, but what's the proof in this? IT-Conductor has been around for 11 years. IT-Conductor SIT Refresh is a solution prior to the Flux that operated as a Java tool. We've had 10 years of that product being available, and customers around the world have done thousands of refreshes across multiple stacks, everything from Windows SQL Server to Oracle to HANA, NetWeaver CRM, BW, all kinds of configs. So the proof is in the pudding. It's efficient. Customer come and do the refresh frequently. They have a real reliable way to bring back the configuration regardless of what the experience is. So sometimes now we see a single system refresh weekend might do a whole landscape like a CRM, a BW, SCM, etc. as one window, because now you're able to orchestrate and do a lot of the automation. You don't need so many different people. And a lot of the system storage can bring back database pretty quickly as well. So the PCA portion is greatly shorten the hours down to the minutes and save a lot of time and energy in that sense. Okay. So last overview slide before I hop into kind of a demo. So this is just a summary, so I won't go through it. We have a cockpit, we have config, we're monitoring imports, etc., etc. And some of our RISE customer that we actually work with on-prem is actually now in RISE. The solution works seamlessly both on-prem and in RISE. So essentially, if you've imported the transport into your system, it's in the QA in production, you refresh and the product just launched natively in SAPGUI. So really, there's nothing else to do on top of that. There's not a need to do anything extra to get the product working. And customers can do refresh with confidence across different multiple hybrid landscapes. So I'm in our lab here, and we recently just did a database copy of our S/4HANA 2023 from production to a QA demo environment, and the system comes up. So when you go launch Flux, it's a simple transport, and you have available the transaction. It's essentially IT-Conductor FLUX. So that's the transaction. I'm already in here, so I won't launch it, but that's pretty much the transaction. When you come into this cockpit, you can create a new config, or you can copy a prior one. What we do is we look at the operating system files that we've shared from either a past refresh or whatever, and we read that config in. So without actually creating a new one, I'm going to show you what happened during the export phase. So when we create a config, all of these show no status. And this one is completed. That means the status of the export has been done. And then the import also has been done. Now, when you click on any of these give you the view of the job logs of all that is exported, right? So every time we export the config, there are tables listing in the R3 translog. So that's available for the export import process. So everything, for instance, in this particular case, we exported all of these, but we only import in these configs, right? So in the import side, one of the things you got to make sure is that when you have a system refreshed, you have the same client. So you obviously in production, you have a production client. In your QA, that same client. If you don't have a client because maybe you wipe out your QA that had multiple clients and you want to restore everything back to all the clients, you got to go and pre-create those clients and import it back in. So you can see in here that it does talk about clients as export. So whatever clients that we exported out, we bring it back in again. So if you have more than one clients there, you need to pre-create that and import it back in. I'm going to, so all of these jobs are there, but I'm just going to create a new one for the demo. Okay, so out of this, nothing selected, right? So if I just say I want to create, just pick also these, ECAD, printers, log users, files, Fiori, catalog, gateway config, external command. And then RFCs, maybe printers, profiles, SNC. So again, you can select anything you want that's supported, and then you can export them. So after we save it, go back in here. Okay, we can run the export. So you can see the jobs kicked off already, and these packages already show mostly complete. So depending how much data you have in the system, look like the Fiori catalog is still running. So while that's running, you can take a look at any of the logs, right? So this export out the data stored on the file system. So if the database gets wiped out, that data will stay safe, then you can bring back. Okay. So we also lock this config, so you can't have two people doing export the same system or importing at the same system, right? Because you obviously you don't want that conflicting. So when you have Flux running, somebody else try to run it, it will actually say that it's actually locked, and somebody else might have it. Okay, so now I've exported out. That's stored in the OS. So let me go and maybe, you know what, just to do a simple test. But let's just say we want to go delete system connection or something like that. This, I'm gonna pretend. Okay, so it's deleted. Did I delete it? Okay, so that FES system is gone. If I decide to delete a bunch of things, that GSC one, I can also just something to show when I import it back in. Okay, so let's say you bring production down and your license key is different as well. Obviously, you can do that as well. And we can take a look at, did we do license in this one? We didn't do license. Or STMS or your config or your external command or something like that. But let's just do a simple config here. So I'm going to exit out of that RFC screen. And I'm going to run the restore back. So now let's say I don't want to bring back something. Maybe I don't want to bring back commands because I don't want to do that. Or maybe I don't want to bring back printers or Fiori catalog because it took a long time. And maybe my Fiori catalog's different. I want to transport up something else. So let's just say like that, right? We can just save it. And then we can import it back in. So now I want to import without these two packages. After your database refresh, again, we read it from the OS. As soon as you bring it up, it reads back the config anyway. So even if your system come down from production, it will read this package in. And I'm going to say continue. All right, so that just kicked off the import. Generally, import runs a little bit longer than export. That's just always the way it works, but it depends on the system. Most config run pretty fast if you have some tables that are really large, like you found maybe a workflow inbox or something like that. That may be a little bit longer. But as they run, or just monitor. So if you were doing this manually and you had like 80 different config, imagine doing that manually. Or if you have some script and you didn't keep up what the changes SAP has, sometimes you'll be missing a table, missing something. I know it's people can write stuff. It's just not very feasible and cannot keep up to date as far as the version changes and the config that may come back. AOE seems like it's talking, but since it's bringing back the auto guide, I'm going to check while we are waiting the end. If you are importing users, there are a couple additional steps that a user have a complex relationship with things like addresses. We also can kick off what we call like a pause import of a package that can run a certain program to synchronize buffers. It's kind of a standard thing we do that's built into certain packages. So there's ability to not only bring back the data, but also run some jobs afterwards as well. And still running. Let me just take a look. So while still running, you can look at the log. It actually tells you that there should be like commit points going on. So you can change also we have a technical config, how often they commit. If you have a lot of data you want to commit too often, and you can get the data in faster at the risk of buffers and memory and database commit stuff. But that's also an option. And back in the main config screen, we have ability for you to configure here. So this points out what the configuration is, the directory for the data, and also the export system, because sometimes you can export, you can import back to multiple different systems. So we just want to make sure you know when you are exporting, when you come out here in the main screen, it shows you what the export system is. Okay. The other settings, like I said before, the commit frequency, you can change this, and that will essentially control how R3 trans in terms of how often it commits the data. So we've seen some really big commit for large tables. So that's what it does. We also have, when you first download the product, you will need a product key. So we will send you, if you're on a trial, reach out. Basically, we register and give you a trial key. And once you license it, we'll give you the key to work for that product, right? So let's go back in. Is it done yet? It's still running there. Okay. I'm going to check back to okay. So I always have to update. Take a look at, let me see. Oops, let's see. So what we imported back in, 2 entries, that one and that one. Okay, so I think those are done. And connection tests. I don't know if this one was working before. Yes, works. And this one also works. So you just restore all those RFC connections. So the same thing goes for everything else. Log on group, server groups, whatever you have in the technical settings will come back. Pretty straightforward. Now, if you browse the OS, for instance, you can see that we store our configs in directory. For every time you save a config, we create a config folder, and that's where the data goes. And if you have a separate export directory, then we'll write to that directory. So you can think doesn't exist. Oh, actually, it's the other way around. So when you export, obviously you have so this is directory, and you say today the new one got created, I believe, that here, and all of your data exported was stored in here. So that's why we can restore back configurations. We can actually bring back all of the data, even if you wipe the database, because we store the config safely there. But by default, they're in here. Right? So this is the config tab that we always read. So if you're doing multiple refreshes, maybe every month, whatever, you can always go back and look at what you did last time. Again, typically most customers do copy and retain the same config unless you're changing the requirements for that particular refresh, right? So let me check one more time. Okay, now that's finished. So we were in archive. I think it was AOE cast. So you can see the long history of the import itself. Right. Really, that's it. After you bring back, again, you choose what you bring back. The only thing different is with batch jobs and variants that they run in the synchronous as opposed to asynchronous. And we typically recommend to separate out those different packages. So in summary, IT-Conductor FLUX is a simple tool given cockpit in the GUI. So before you do your system refresh, you in QA do the export, and then after the refresh, you bring back config that you want and then import. First, bring up the system and lock out users and suspend jobs. But other than that, we don't need jobs unsuspended to run cockpit for IT-Conductor FLUX, as we kicked our own jobs, we manage our own jobs that way. Okay, so I want to kind of keep it simple in the demo, and I wanted to essentially open up for any questions. Identify delta transfer between persons. So the remote compare function is, I see a question from that there is a facility to do remote compare if, for instance, in our full orchestration, if you identify the list of transports, we actually have a solution called CHI, Change Automation Intelligence, that can automate mass transport back into the system. If you're interested in CHI, it's basically a replacement of SAP Transport and also CHI. So take a look at that. But yes, we do have customers today. They generate the remote compare. They produce a list of transport numbers that has not gone to production, that went to QA. And then afterwards, we use the mass transport facility. We have to import it back in. So it depends how many we're talking about, if it's 5, 10 or whatever, but typically the remote compare will give you that list before you do your refresh. I see a question above as well. What about disabling production-related RFCs, background jobs, and other stuff in production? We are refreshing sandbox from production. Yeah, so the whole thing is we can, if you use our end-to-end orchestration, not the PCA only, we can do a lot of things. So some of our customers take a whole workflow. So when we do the whole end-to-end refresh, it's actually a orchestration. So in orchestration manner, if you go to solutions, IT-Conductor workflow, our refresh automation has 3 different offerings. One is a full end-to-end orchestration that can do a lot more about things like running certain jobs, running activities on any box, even taking a backup of production and using the backup to restore to QA, and running things from coordinated jobs, client copy, BDLS afterwards. So this is what we call kind of end-to-end automation. If you look at the solution comparison, we have IT-Conductor FLUX, which is standalone and runs in ABAP. But then you have the end-to-end automation that can do everything in between, activities on every step. Obviously, you need access to database copies, OS level stuff. If you're in RISE, it's a little bit more limited here, but essentially we can run any type of jobs. If you want to suspend, maybe you do have a maintenance window in production for your system copy where you maybe have an hour and you want to do a fresh kind of when a copy of the database. I've seen customers actually say, oh, run these in production under that 1 hour maintenance and then take the copy like a snapshot database and then release in production. So when they come to QA, you are coming up with a kind of a more clean environment. If you are doing that with multiple systems, like taking a copy of production of ECC or S4 and then a copy of BW, copy CRM, you want to do it at the same time because then the interconnectivity and the data is in sync. Again, that's also an option to do that, like orchestrated, right, way of doing that. So, and I think I answered, maybe there's another question. Premiki-san, does this tool help with selective data refresh? No, time slice, as I said, we only deal with technical config at this stage. We do have some tools that we're working on that potentially can save your other data, table copy data, transaction, but right now that's not an available product. So there are third-party products that can do your time slice, etc. but primarily IT-Conductor FLUX deal with the technical config to help you with the PCA. Okay, so hopefully I have answered those questions that folks have typed in. Any other questions at this stage? If not, I would like to thank you for all attending the solution today that we presented, IT-Conductor FLUX. And in the offer that we have is, if you like to run a trial, let's say your next refresh, tag us for a spin, take the DeLorean out and put the IT-Conductor FLUX to give you your time back, flash back your data, have the ability to get your PCA done quickly. We'll give you a 30-day license key, and that will get you through whatever refresh activity you have, kick the tires. We can even sit down and maybe after you import, show you how it runs and everything else. So you're welcome to take the trial and let us know. So one license copy works for your landscape. So if you're doing production to QA, maybe production to sandbox, whatever in that stack, that's just one license copy. Okay. Okay, well, thank you. I had fun presenting today. There's a lot of interesting things to talk about in the world of automating operations, and IT-Conductor is at the forefront of doing orchestration, automation for a lot of technical folks, basis included. Whether you're on-prem or in cloud or hybrid of some sort, we can work with your environment in any which way to help you address your operational need. Let me see, there's one more chat linking. Okay. Pricing model. Yeah, I think I did. Maybe I didn't share my screen, but I will share my screen correctly here. This is the pricing model. It's transparent on our website. It's called System Refresh Automation Web Link. We will send out an email of the recording with any type of follow-up that you like. And in terms of taking it for a spin, we highly recommend to get it running in your environment as part of the POC. We'll be happy to, I'm just a basis guy by heart, so I'd love to get it into your hands and do things what I wish I had years ago before building this. So really, it's a joy to see customers able to save, even if you save, a bunch of hours and get some sleep back. That's a wonderful thing to do. And again, avoid mistakes that you don't have to fix maybe for a week after is also a very good thing to have. So yeah. All right, here I will wrap up the webinar, and hopefully you can provide us some feedback. We'll send out an email for all the registered, and about a week from now we should have the video up recording to share with your team if needed. But it's pretty straightforward, and if you want to reach out to us, feel free to ping any of me online or the team, and looking to see you in the near future. Thank you.